journalist in Canada, Sarah Thompson, who was assigned to write a piece on an abandoned psychiatric hospital just outside of Toronto. It was known for being a relic of the past, a place forgotten by time, but still whispering secrets of its sordid history. The hospital had been shut down for decades, its crumbling walls holding memories of experiments and tragedies. Sarah arrived one chilly autumn afternoon, notebook in hand, ready to uncover whatever strange truths the building might offer. At first, everything seemed typical for such a place. The musty scent of decay, the peeling paint, and the eerie silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog. She took her time walking through the old corridors, the echo of her footsteps the only sound. The place felt abandoned, no signs of life, no lingering energy, or so she thought. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Sarah began to hear things, soft whispers that seemed to float just beyond the edge of her hearing. At first, she thought it was the wind or her own imagination playing tricks on her, but then she heard footsteps, faint but deliberate, coming from somewhere deep within the hospital. Sarah stood still for a moment, heart racing, but when she turned the corner to investigate, there was no one there. The shadows seemed to move too, flickering at the edges of her vision. She dismissed it, attributing the strange occurrences to the dim lighting and her growing exhaustion, but it didn't stop. The whispers continued, now clearer, though no words could be made out. The footsteps grew louder, closer, as if someone or something was following her. She decided to push on, chalking it up to stress. After all, she had just come off a heavy work schedule, but the unsettling feeling was hard to shake. A cold chill settled over her, and she noticed that some of the doors that had been closed when she entered were now ajar. They weren't unlocked when she had tried them earlier, and when she returned to some of the rooms she'd already explored, objects were no longer where she had left them. By nightfall, Sarah's unease had morphed into genuine fear. She tried to leave, but the doors wouldn't open. She tugged and pushed, but they were stuck as if locked from the inside. The air grew thick, suffocating, and she could feel the temperature drop. It wasn't just cold. It was a deep, unnatural cold that seemed to seep into her bones. Suddenly, she saw it, a shadow darting across the hallway. It was so quick that she almost thought it was her mind playing tricks again. But then, she heard a voice, quiet and distant, but unmistakable. "Help us." Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to face the source of the voice, but all she could see were the empty hallways, now bathed in the ghostly light of the moon streaming through broken windows. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, until they felt like a chorus of voices, all demanding attention. In a panic, Sarah turned back toward the nearest door, desperate to escape. But as she reached for the handle, it swung open on its own. A figure appeared in the doorway, a woman, pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow, her mouth agape as if trying to scream, but unable to. Frozen in terror, Sarah couldn't move. The woman slowly lifted a hand, pointing at her, and whispered in a voice that chilled Sarah to her core. "Don't leave, not yet." The lights flickered, and the figure vanished into the darkness. Her heart was racing, but Sarah knew she couldn't just run. She had to understand what was happening. As her breath steadied, she took one last, trembling look at the room she had opened. Inside, she found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. It detailed the lives of patients once held in the hospital, people subjected to cruel treatments, lobotomies, and inhumane experiments. The suffering they endured was beyond belief, and many had died in the very room she was standing in. The more Sarah read, the clearer the truth became. The souls of these patients were trapped in the hospital, their spirits unable to rest. The whispers, the cold, the moving objects, it was all them. They weren't trying to scare her. They were crying out for release, for vengeance, or perhaps both. The hospital had been abandoned after an investigation into its practices, but it had never been truly forgotten. The pain of those who had died here lingered, and now, it seemed, they were reaching out for someone, anyone, to hear their story. As Sarah stumbled out of the building, the doors finally opening to release her, she understood. The supernatural occurrences had not been a haunting, but a plea for acknowledgement, a cry from the past. The patients had never left, not because they were trapped, but because they needed to be remembered. The hospital had been a place of horrors, but it was the forgotten souls that made it truly terrifying. Hit subscribe and don't dare miss what's coming next. Or the next scream you hear might be your own.